Thanks for tuning into the For Those Made to Do podcast. We are your hosts, Mandy Sahota
and Bianca Pavel. This podcast is all about the doers who have achieved career success in the UAE and the stories that go with it.
In this episode, we're talking to David Satul, Head of Data Analytics at Hill and Knowlton. The conversation approaches data analytics from more of a creative lens and how you can combine data and storytelling to influence, uncovering that data visualization isn't just about charts.
If you'd like to know why data is one of the world's most valuable currencies, why everyone must work on their data fluency skills, and which consumer trends are dominating the UAE and Saudi market, then grab a cup of coffee and tune into this episode. We hope you enjoy it. Welcome back, everyone, to a new episode of For Those Made to Do. Today, we're talking about a mega topic, one that has been dominating the news and the career charts for the past few years: business intelligence and big data. But first, some data on it. Some reports claim that 90% of the world's data was generated in the last 2 years alone. So this year, in 2023 alone, we're producing 60% more data than 13 years ago. That's 120 zettabytes, which is only expected to grow again by over 150% in the next 2 years. To take a closer look at this industry, we have invited in our studio David Satul, the current head of data and analytics at Hill and Knowlton Strategies, one of the world's largest PR firms, and previously a senior strategist in data at Ogilvy. So David, thank you so much for joining us today. Mandy and I are so happy to have you back on campus. How are you and how is your day?
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Bianca. Thank you, Mandy. Pleasure to be here again.
Amazing. You shared with us in your bio that you were a professional swimmer at a national level in France. So kudos to you for that.
Thank you.
We'll be directing a lot of questions to you today, requiring quick thinking at times. So on that note, what was your quickest swim time?
So which event? Which stroke?
This is good. Will you tell us?
The largest one.
The hardest one, yeah. Can you do the
hardest
butterfly?
one.
Yeah.
I can do the butterfly, but I would say the 50-meter freestyle or 100-meter freestyle tends to be the quickest stroke and the quickest times. On 50-meter freestyle is probably just kind of in the low 25 seconds, and then on the 100 free, I was more towards the high 54s, so 54.9 on the 100 free. Long course.
Amazing. I'm not a swimmer, but that sounds pretty fast to me.
I'm a swimmer, and I know it takes me an easy minute and a half to do it. And I've had the pleasure of meeting David before. He's come to some of our campus events as a Holt alum, but it would be great for our listeners to get to know you a little bit better as well. So could you give us a bit of an overview of your kind of career trajectory to date?
Yeah, of course. I have a pretty odd trajectory, both educationally and professionally, I would say. So I started off my studies in France, my university studies, but I quickly decided that I wanted to continue abroad. So I actually moved to the US pretty early on in my studies. I used to be a professional swimmer, and I was able to unlock an athletic scholarship in one of the top universities in Florida. So that allowed me to move to the US really quickly at the beginning. And I was able to graduate from that university with a bachelor in international business. And then that led me to move to China and join Holt on the Shanghai campus in 2014. And upon graduation in 2015, I actually decided to join the recruitment industry. I started off my career as an executive headhunter, joining a very boutique agency in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. So definitely a little bit odd, but that was an amazing experience, and that actually led me to move to different countries afterwards. I moved to Portugal, I moved to Hong Kong, I moved to Singapore, and now I ended up being in Dubai. So definitely quite of a journey so far.
Yeah, that truly is like that global citizen mentality, which is great to see. And how did you end up in analytics?
So I was a little odd as well. Once I closed that chapter on recruitment, I actually moved to a digital marketing agency, something pretty small, sort of startup vibe, small clients, small budgets, doing a little bit of everything within the agency. And then I actually was a little bit more interested in being technically savvy and sort of explore that more complex side of marketing. So you could talk about marketing analytics, a bit of website development sometimes too, SEO, SEM, so those sort of area. I was so interested that I ended up quitting my job and moving to Barcelona to do a coding bootcamp in front end and back end development. So that was super interesting to me, not necessarily because I wanted to become a developer or I wanted to go into like hardcore coding skills.
Yeah.
But just because I was always very interested in what was going on in the background when you look at a website, when you look at any kind of product. And from there, I actually ended up just moving to Singapore and looking for opportunities more in the product management field. I managed to speak to someone at Hill Knowlton in Singapore, which really convinced me to join the agency. And then from there, I sort of continued to explore the sort of data side of marketing, which was really cool, really interesting. And I sort of continued in that space. And a lot of people ask me, do you think doing the boot camp is in any way beneficial to the job that you have now? And I would say it still is. I'm not necessarily doing the exact same things, but gaining that technical knowledge has now allowed me to explore areas of comms, marketing, and PR within the realm of data analytics that I think I wouldn't have been able to explore without going through that bootcamp, because I acquired a lot of technical knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah. So for anyone unfamiliar with Hill and Knowlton, can you introduce the company a little bit?
Yeah, of course. So we sort of position ourselves as an integrated comms agency. So I know Bianca sort of introduced us as one of the world's largest PR firms, which is true because Hill Knowlton was founded in the US and initially started as a very traditional PR firm and quickly sort of expanded to the rest of the world. But obviously PR has its own limitations, and the world of PR has also been evolving to the point where agencies that used to be in PR are now sort of extending to more integrated comms. So for listeners, and maybe even for you guys, because I'm not sure how much you know about integrated comms, because it's also a term that I didn't necessarily know before joining Hill & Knowlton. But integrated means that we're looking at communications across all different kind of channels. So we have more of a 360 approach to the communication strategies that we give away to our clients and that they consult us on. And Hill & Knowlton is part of WPP, which is one of the largest conglomerate of agencies. And I'm sure you guys have heard about WPP before. So we're just part of many agencies that they have now under their portfolio of agencies. And Hill & Knowlton has sort of strategically started to look at the innovation and creativity side of communications as well. If you want to remain competitive in this market, you have to constantly innovate, whether it's in terms of your approaches, whether it's in terms of your products or your services that you offer to clients. So I'm very lucky to be sitting within what we call the Innovation and Creativity Hub at Hill & Knowlton. So I actually joined the INC, which we call the INC Hub, in Singapore when I joined the Singapore office. And now I sit in the INC Hub in the Dubai office, which is really cool because that allows me as an analytics professional to really touch on a lot of projects across multiple sectors. So I don't necessarily specialize in sports clients or government clients or healthcare clients. I just really touch on a variety of the portfolio of clients that we have, which is really good.
That's really cool. And I think as well, when people think analytics, sometimes they forget that actually in the marketing realm, that there's access to so many data points. That was my first introduction as well to data analytics, because I used to work for a integrated marketing consultancy as well, CACI. We used to kind of work with a lot of raw data, but actually the creativity that was coming from all the insights and the trend was really quite interesting to see what the output was creatively with the campaigns and things like that. So I think people get a bit bogged down in the data science of it all, but actually there is a kind of creative side to it as well.
100%. And a lot of people think of data as sort of that measurement and reporting side, especially in the communications agency spectrum. But we use a lot of data as well for more what we call the research and insights, which is essentially sort of the things that we don't necessarily know, but we uncover through the exploration and the analysis of data, and that would then led to really interesting creative strategies. And so we have an array of tools and that gives us access to a lot of that data. And then it's our job as data analysts and data strategists to really take that data in the raw form and then bring it to life. So
How long did you spend as an analyst before you got to strategist?
it's sort of a bit of a combination of both, because at Hale Norton, even if we are the people analyzing data, then we're also being asked to ask ourselves, so what and so why? And so I think it's interesting because that's sort of dual profiles that I have been creating for myself. And I think in the world of communications, anyone that touches on data is not going to be just a data analyst, is also going to think about strategy.
Exciting. I love this new perspective on data and the people that work with it and what it actually means in practice. And when I think of data, I think of something that provides a lot of insight, and with that comes quite a bit of power. And I've heard many people comparing data to currency. So I'm really interested to hear your opinion on this. Is data the world's most valuable currency at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about cryptocurrency and other type of currencies, I think we're definitely heading that way. Data is becoming just more and more present in our everyday life. With us wanting it or not, it's really difficult to ignore now the importance that data plays in our lives and in the lives of companies, in the lives of governments, in the lives of personalities. I think it is already one of the ways that we use to demonstrate success, to show progress, to even predict the future. And it's funny because in the world of cybersecurity, and I was sort of reflecting on that question. What's the number one thing that hackers are after?
Data, right?
Right? Usually when they end up doing what they were initially wanting to do, that data is then sort of converted into a money value, right? They ask for ransom, or they ask for a certain amount of dollars or currency in exchange for that data back. And that's purely the transactional value of data leaks and data sort of being stolen by third parties. But when you think about it, any company that gets their data sort of breached or stolen, I think in the world that we're living in now, any kind of data is becoming extremely valuable, whether it's consumer data, whether it's transaction data, whether it's business data. Sometimes even government data are at risk. And you can say it's becoming a very, very demanded type of currency.
Yeah, absolutely. And then another example comes to my mind, which is around the apps that we're seeing today, right? The free apps that we all have access to. And everybody keeps saying, if you're not paying for the product, then you're the product. And what they mean by that is your data is the product. So a lot of these companies are putting free apps out there. And, Facebook is probably, or Meta is probably the biggest example of that. You can use it for free, but they're going to use your data and then sell it to advertisers. So in that regard, data really becomes a currency because Meta is making money off the back of the data you're producing on their platform that they're storing on you.
100%. And all of that data is then used for better targeting. And like you said, it's being sort of given to advertisers, and they can do whatever they want with it. And it has pros, but it has cons.
Absolutely. All right. So let's bring a little bit of clarity to this whole arena, because as I was saying at the very beginning, it has become such a big industry. And with that, we've seen a lot of new jobs being created. And with those jobs, we're seeing lots of different job titles that lead to pretty much the same arena, but somehow they're different. So as somebody who has grown through the ranks and understands these job titles very well, can you shed a bit of light on what type of roles require that programming coding skill and which ones don't. I'll give you some examples of some roles that we've seen lately. So we're seeing business analytics, we're seeing research analyst, data science, big data, data mining. All of these words are related to the same topic. Tell us a bit about that.
I would actually categorize those jobs into sort of three main area. We have what we call data scientists, then you have what you call data engineers, and then you have data analysts. I would say those are the three key sort of type of data roles. And then within each of those data roles, they have a lot of subcategories as well. But I would say that all those roles, whether if they're related to data, have some sort of technology component that those people need to have. Technology is more about having the ability to quickly pick up on different tools and different softwares and different sort of platforms that will give that data to them, and then they'll be able to make something out of it.
Do you think if, like, for example, some of our students, MBAs in particular, are interested in becoming an analyst of some respect, and they've shown that they've got an aptitude of some technical understanding, maybe programming or learning a visualization tool, would that be enough to transition, do you think? Like, what would be the thing that they need to kind of get it over the line?
No, they would. I think if they have that sort of basics in programming and just kind of understand the foundations of coding, I think that's definitely one big component. If they've also sort of taught themselves how to use data visualization tools, and on top of that, if there are people that are quite curious and quite hungry and can pick up technology really quickly, which I don't think is a major issue for a lot of people, then I think the data analyst route is definitely something that's possible.
And David, can we just ask you to give us a couple of examples of some tools that you're using day to day?
I used to really be good at Google Data Studio, which is a Google product, really great for beginners. If anyone wants to sort of pick up on Data Studio, it's actually quite friendly to use and a lot of people can start using it. Now within the company, we're transitioning towards Power BI, which is a Microsoft product. And that one is slightly more complex, but honestly, it's the same principles. And then you obviously have Tableau as well, which I know Holt also uses in some of the courses. Those are the three main ones.
What about coding?
In terms of languages, honestly, aside from SQL, there's no other programming languages that I personally use in my day-to-day job, and no one else in the company also does any sort of coding. We also use coverage data for a lot of analysis. A lot of the work that we do is more perception focused. So what we do is we take, 12 months worth of coverage data about a company or a topic or a person, and we sort of analyze all of that data, and we come up with very interesting sort of patterns that we've noticed or insights that would allow us to better understand how that company or that organization has been portrayed in the media, whether it's across media in the Middle East or media internationally. So we do a lot of coverage analysis. And then on top of that, so Bianca, I know you and I, we talked about social listening. That's also a very, very interesting field. Social listening is just the principle of looking at social media data to also uncover really interesting insights about brand, about person, about a topic. So social listening is essentially looking at conversation data on Twitter and other sort of social media platforms that allow us to have that data. And not all social media platforms allow us to have access to that data. So interestingly,
Are you able to disclose? I was going to say, let's just dig in here.
Actually, Facebook and obviously then Instagram by default are the two platforms that are really difficult to get public data.
That's interesting because I really feel like Instagram listens a lot.
So it listens to you and then they use that data to then give it away to advertisers. For people like me, we subscribe to third-party tools that have then direct relationships with Facebook. But when it comes to conversations on groups or conversations on your own feed, or if you post anything on your Facebook account, that's not something I can see. I can see your latest tweet. I can see what you recently posted on a thread on Reddit if you want to. but I can't see your latest Instagram post or your latest Facebook post. So that's, if your profiles are private, that's not something I can see.
It's actually really interesting.
I mean, that's actually really good news, right? And I'd be really interested to understand if this is something relatively new that they've developed because they went through so much scrutiny with Cambridge Analytica and, the big scandal, and then they became really, really tightly regulated. If it's something newer or if it's something that was always there from the beginning. But in some way, it's actually reassuring to know that they don't disclose everything on their users.
Yeah.
In one of our previous episodes, we focus on sales and business development. A lot of our kind of students, especially in this region, end up in those types of roles. And we kind of drew to the conclusion that sales is a universal skill. Do you think that data literacy is becoming the new must-have skill for all workers, regardless of the type of role that you're in? And how do you see that trajectory going, especially here in the UAE?
100%. And I couldn't emphasize that even more, because even within Hill Norton, within the organization, there's a big push from senior leadership to make sure that everyone is data literate or data fluent. So data fluency and data literacy are very, very similar, but essentially it's just making sure that everyone is quite comfortable looking at data, interpreting data, and visualizing data. And those things are, it's actually part of my responsibility as the head of data analytics at Hill Norton to make sure that I train people often enough for them to be more comfortable. And there's a lot of, day-to-day tasks that people outside of data roles have to do. And those tasks do involve in some shape or form any sort of use of data. And if not, then the use of the tools that we have. And all those tools will give us some sort of data. So we expect people outside of data analytics and the department that lead to be comfortable with what they're looking at and sort of making up a story. And, when you think about it, there's a lot, the technology that we use on an everyday basis requires some sort of level of data literacy. For example, do you use like a sleep tracker?
I do.
Do you actually like to look at the analytics?
Yeah.
Don't you think it requires some sort of basics in data to be able to look at the graphs or the stats that the product is giving you to be able to really understand?
Yeah, a basic level, because you've got that visual the visualization of the data. You kind of like, okay, cool.
But it's simplified a lot. Like you can easily see, it's color coded. It has all these charts. You can easily just look at it and be like, oh, I had a good sleep last night.
And those tools really just use the foundations of data storytelling and data visualization, right? So it's not rocket science. It's just pure user experience principles. Yeah, and Bianca is right. Those products they just simplify very large data sets into something that is digestible for a user. But that's just back to my point that anything around you is still revolving around data to some shape or form. So having some understanding of percentages, of averages, of just kind of bar charts and donut charts, I think those things are still quite interesting. And you'd be surprised by the number of people that still don't really have those foundations and perhaps don't interpret data the same way that you do.
And to follow up on that, can you tell us a bit about the role that data visualization and storytelling play in business strategy? You do this for your clients every day, right?
Yeah.
And where do you start? So you're looking at a data set and it's already been processed in a way and it's been transformed into these beautiful dashboards that are color coded and, in a way simplified. How do you then take those insights and transpose them into the strategy?
Yeah. So you're right. That's sort of the main difference between what a data scientist or a data engineer would be doing compared to what my role is. So I'm very lucky because a lot of the data that I look at is already structured, already processed, and sort of cleaned. So a lot of my role is more about asking those tools for the right data and then obviously making sense of it, identifying patterns and sort of creating a story around what I see. Data visualization and storytelling have been a huge passion for me. I see those two areas as almost art. And so people are now expected to sort of deal with that kind of data and bring it to life themselves, even in non-data roles. Someone can be in sales and they're being asked by the top leadership to sort of prepare a presentation about what was the sales performance in the last quarter. That will require some sort of basics in data visualization and storytelling to be able to bring all of that data to life and present it in a way that is going to be digestible to your audience, right? So if you're talking to top executives at your firm, you want to make sure that they understand your story, and you need to make sure that the way you visualize and present that data is going to make sense to them. On top of that, you see a lot of data visualization being now sort of done even in social media content. I'm not sure if you guys are doing any at Holt, but I can see now a lot of companies that when they publish educational content, they use data visualization and storytelling to sort of make sense of data that they have found somewhere else, a different source, or data that they own and they want to bring it into their social media content. You can also see a lot of out-of-home campaigns that are using data visualization. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Spotify and the year campaign, the Wrapped campaign, right? That is for me one of the best examples there is out there when it comes to using data storytelling for marketing purposes. And they use their own data, right?
Yeah.
It's customer data in a sense, user data, but they do it in a way that doesn't really go in conflict with, data privacy or ethics.
You're happy that they're doing it, right? And for anyone who's listening who's not quite sure what we're talking about, if you have Spotify, you'll probably see this around December or January time. Spotify normally gives you a wrap up of your year, and they say, this is how many hours you've spent on our platform. These are the top songs you've listened to. These are the top podcasts you've listened to. And then they kind of create a little wrap up of your year, and then they give you some highlights. And then I think they also give you some clips of, this is your favorite Taylor Swift song. Here's 30 seconds of it. And then they do a little mashup of that, and it's just so personalized and it's so beautiful. It's kind of nice to look back at your year through that lens of, these are all the songs I discovered or I loved this year. So yeah, I think that's a really good example.
Yeah, and they do it in such a cool, interactive way as well that really engages you as a user, as an audience. And
it's like playing on your emotions as well, isn't it? Because when you hear a song, it always like taps into like a memory or something like that. So it's quite smart, really.
yeah. So I really see data visualization at sort of that intersection between data, but also design and also sort of narrative and storytelling, which is really cool to me. And as you know, data on its own doesn't really tell much of a story. Unless you visualize it, not much is going to come up out of looking at it. So charts, graphs are really important for everyone to know how to manipulate. And it's not about manipulating data. It's more about choosing the right type of visualization for the right type of message that you want to convey. And that applies to business strategy as well, right? And obviously, what we offer to our clients is communication strategy. And sometimes I like to weave in storytelling and data into the type of comms that I think clients could really benefit from doing a little bit more, because it's great for educational content. It's great for bringing those things to life that are quite difficult otherwise.
And to pick up on something that you mentioned at the beginning, you're covering sports, government, tech, product packaging. And like you said, you don't specialize in one. So we'd love to hear a bit about what kind of trends you're seeing.
Yeah, of course. It's a really interesting question, because a very big part of our job as data analytics professionals in the comms industry is also to keep up with trends, right? Because that's something that is super important for our clients as well. If they want to stay on top of their category and stay on top of the competition, they obviously need to sort of position themselves as a company that is ahead of their crowd and stay on top of trends. Some of the key consumer trends that we've noticed in the region, at least, I would say sustainability is a big one. I think we're now seeing probably a phase that the European consumer and the American consumer has gone through a few years back, but now we're seeing it in the GCC region, where consumers are becoming a lot more sustainability conscious. So in terms of the way that they make decisions when it comes to buying a new product or buying from a different company, I think the younger generation has now much higher expectations from brands when it comes to sustainability practices, whether it's how the product is being produced or manufactured to how it's being sold. So sustainability, especially amongst the younger crowd, is one big trend. I think when it comes to technology as well, something that I've noticed across multiple studies is how social media is so prominent here. And you have, I think Saudi Arabia, for example, is one of the countries with the higher social media penetration in the world. So I think close to 99% of the population has access to social media, which is extremely high.
That's very high. What kind of social media?
So one of the most popular social media platform in Saudi Arabia is Twitter and Snapchat. So super interesting is when we do a lot of communication strategy, we tend to also look at audiences and we look at their behaviors and attitudes. And when when we look at social media behaviors, we quickly come to the realization that this part of the world is extremely social media savvy. They can be on close to like 6, 7 different platforms at once. And if not, they have multiple devices as well. So they do spend close to 4 hours a day on social media, which is good news for advertisers and anyone who's trying to reach that audience, especially on those platforms.
And is that across all age ranges, or is there a specific age that engages with social media more?
I would say the 16 to 24 is probably the age range that interacts the most on a daily basis with social media platforms, on top of just casually being online on their mobile. So it doesn't have to always be on social, but I think just overall that audience tends to be on their phone a lot of the times during the day.
So it's really interesting to hear that insight on Saudi. Are there any other kind of trends that you can share from that region?
Yeah, of course. So Saudi Arabia is, as you probably both know, is growing at an exponential rate, right? There's a lot happening within the country to sort of push the country's reputation, the country's perception internationally. And they use a lot of different type of initiatives to be able to change that perception and move the country forward. I think from a population standpoint, it's an interesting dilemma that we're looking at because we're looking at a country that, 15, 20 years ago was probably not where they are now. And they have this vision of being at such an interesting place in 10 years from now. And that sort of, at least that makes me question a little bit more about how is that population going to be adapting so quickly to so many changes, whether it's technological changes, digital changes, but also just infrastructure. And I know you've had a lot of other guests on your podcast talking about mega projects in Saudi, and all of those projects seem so ambitious. Are they realistic? That's a different question. But overall, the kingdom is doing so much work across so many different sectors, whether it's pushing the culture, arts and culture agenda with more museums to sort of educate the general population about their heritage, but also about for international visitors visiting the country and sort of pushing a little bit more about the history. We've looked at it with sports as well, and I'm not sure if you guys are football fans. I'm not, but I get to hear a lot about it with
Here
my
and
job.
there, yeah.
But you know how much the country is investing in football players as well to be coming to the kingdom and play in Saudi Arabian football clubs. And all of those initiatives are part of a much bigger vision that MBS, the Crown Prince, have in mind for the kingdom. It's super interesting.
Yeah, almost sounds as if the whole country could be your client and they would be going through this whole rebranding kind of phase, and they're trying to invest in different areas and try to change their perception, because you were talking about perception analysis and sentiments before. So it looks like Saudi is really trying to open up and also tell the story of who they are and attract more people to go and work there, live there, or just visit.
Yeah, 100%. It's all about changing how they're currently perceived internationally. And all the communications that they put out there is for that purpose and that purpose only.
Amazing. I think it's a really good time to draw the conversation to a close on such a positive note. I have to say, you really are a good storyteller. You made data digestible, which is amazing. And thanks for helping us unpack the world of data, especially given the increasing trend that we're seeing from Holt students as well. They're wanting to kind of pursue these kind of analytical roles. So I think this conversation will definitely kind of help them on their journey towards that. We always close off the episode with a teaser of a wildcard question to give our listeners an opportunity to think about how they would themselves answer the question before they tune into the bonus episode next week. So we will be asking David the following question. With the digital transformation we've seen in this region, what are the opportunities and risks for companies when it comes to a data collection and cybersecurity? So hold. Because we're going to wrap up here and we're going to resume in the bonus episode that you can tune in and listen to next week. Thank you for your time, David.
Thank you, Mandy. Thank you, Bianca, for having me as well.
Thank you, David. It was a great conversation.